Perfect. All right, guys, we're going to try to get through this with minimal feedback. Maybe it's this thing? It's this thing. Okay. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our July 7th Land Use, Landmarks, and Planning Committee meeting. Angel also says hi. I am calling the meeting to order at 6:45 p.m. I'm sorry, I'm usually not tardy, but we had a couple of difficulties and we are back on track. So firstly, I'd like to thank all of the committee members for coming. I know this is obviously new to us again, coming in person. I'd like to extend a huge thank you to everybody in the audience today. I know coming out during a pandemic, wearing masks and having to be socially distant isn't the most ideal thing to do, but it shows me that we care about our community and we're here to do work. So that is exactly what we will do. And a huge, huge thank you to Angel and all the staff who make this possible. So enough of that. We are now going to do roll call. Angel, you need a mic?
I'm good.
I think mine is picking you up.
Jason Villanueva.
Present.
Jessica Morris.
Here.
Elsie Encarnacion.
Present.
Ivy Hume.
Present.
Andrew Padilla is excused. Who's the other one?
Francis Mastroda
Francis Mastroda is excused.
and Elliot.
And Jessica Elliott is excused.
Thank you. We have quorum. Thank you. So my name is Elsie Encarnacion and I'm the chair of the meeting. We will start by the adoption of the agenda. I don't have a script for not online. So
We're doing fine.
okay, thank you. Any motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion to adopt Jason Villanueva.
Thank you. Second?
Did we get an answer on the committee, the minutes?
This is for the agenda.
This is still the agenda. The minutes are next,
That's
but
a
no,
part of the agenda. If we're not going to do it, then.
no, we don't have minutes. So we're gonna need a second on the,
I'll second the motion.
thank you, Ivy. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Opposed?
Thank you, Jessica.
You're opposed, Jessica?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, any announcements, Angel?
No.
No, we are moving through this. Okay. I have no informational updates as of now. We're gonna go right into our presentations and discussion. We are gonna have a committee discussion and vote on the land use application for Las Raisas, the multi-site development project. The applicant is the New York City Department of Housing, Preservation and Development, MDG Development Management Construction, and Ascendant Neighborhood Development. We have no presentation for that, correct? It's just a committee discussion.
Chris, are you going to present anything? Because we haven't seen it.
We're happy to answer any questions that the committee has, but we
You-
are continuing to work on a lot of things that we got feedback on over the last many months and many committee meetings. So, and we're going to come back again, obviously even after this week and next week to keep updating you. We're still working on a bunch of feedback that we got about designs for all of the sites, so we'll have updates. We don't have anything new to share this evening. But, happy to hear further feedback, comments, questions, and answer any questions that the committee members have.
Well, you've done a very good job at giving us presentations. We've had about like 3 or 4 of them, I believe. So if there's any outstanding questions that you guys want to ask.
I just have a point of clarification.
Yes.
So I'm reading here that the point where we're at in the process now, having seen, heard, and listened, questioned, and provided feedback, we are needing to approve or disapprove of the land use application for the project by July 26th. Is that correct? It has been certified in the alert process,
Correct.
and we are giving our blessing or standing opposed to the, which will be taken into account by the Planning Commission.
Right. Well, first it'll go to full board. We'll vote on our next full board meeting in July, and then it will move on through the ULURP process.
So where it is in the
Council.
ULURP process, it's been certified by the Department of City Planning, but it still needs to be, go through the Borough President's office and go back to the City Planning Commission before it can proceed. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Any questions, any comments before we take a vote? Because we do have to vote on it today. No? Any motions? Guys. My committee is not usually this quiet,
Motion
guys.
to approve
Thank
the
you, Jason.
new application by Jason Woodward.
Thank you, Jason. Any
I'm
second?
trying to give some space.
Okay, I'll second the motion to approve the Heroes application.
Thank you, Ivy. All in favor? Well, do we do roll call for that? Yes, I'm sorry, Angel. Go ahead.
Dr. Morris?
Sure.
Yes. Jason Villalobos?
Yay.
Ivy Hume?
Yes.
Encarnación?
Yes.
LP.
Yes.
Motion passes.
We are losing it today.
It's hot.
I know.
All right.
All right, first thing down, we're moving on to our committee discussion and vote on the proposed zoning text amendments. We have 3 in front of us today. One is the citywide hotels text amendment. The next is our Fresh 2 text amendment and health and fitness text amendment, which are all separate. We're going to have George James, who is our consultant to the community board, give a brief presentation and kind of recap. And then we will open it up for discussions. We are also voting on all 3 items today. I forgot you're back. Okay, perfect. Oh, this is, okay.
Okay, you can't see anything, can you?
No, I'm sure we can see it.
Okay, so I prepared very brief summaries of the 3 zoning text amendments you're going to have to make recommendations on today. I've designed to try to be less than 5 minutes per, and I think the way it's set up, well, however you'd like to run it, but we could do it either do one and then have your discussion, do another, have your discussion, or we can do them all right in a row, however you'd like to do it.
Guys, what do you think?
I'm not opposed to any of the text amendments, so I could package it, but I don't know what the other members are going to say.
Well, just in terms of the presentation.
Yeah.
I'll follow
Can
your
I
lead.
to do one and then?
One and then discuss? Okay, we can do that.
Okay.
If it's only about 5 minutes, it's fine.
Okay, so for a reminder, there are these 3, special permit for new hotels, modifications to the Fresh program, and then removal of the special permit for health and fitness establishment. Okay, so we're going to start with the special permit for hotels. So the special use permit that's being proposed will make new hotels development more difficult. And in fact, the DEIS in the application says that will have significant impacts on this industry. But, you know, the city has been adding special permits to new hotels in many locations. In 2017, in East Harlem, the East Harlem Corridors District has a special permit for hotels. In M districts, in 2018, we've added, M1 districts, we added a special permit for hotels. And, you know, the rationale for both of those, there's a good planning rationale. In East Harlem Corridors, that was supposed to be for housing. The idea was you didn't want to have hotels compete with housing. And with M districts, the rationale is that hotels create conflicts with traditional industrial uses that are found there. And so there's a reasonable planning rationale for them. But the idea now is why a new special permit for all hotels everywhere? The new special permit would allow the CPC, this is what they say, is to better manage conflicts between hotel uses and the neighbors. And it would also allow the CPC, because it's discretionary, would allow them to institute requirements for better urban design. And these are a couple of examples they used, the city planning when they came to you saying, well, you know, it could have been designed better. But, you know, since these special permit requirements have gone in place in certain special districts and in M districts, there have been exactly one application for new hotel in those districts. So how does this impact East Harlem? So currently, there is no hotel in East Harlem, not one. But Angel tells me that there is one planned on 125th Street. With the recent changes, with recent zoning changes, there are very few good areas where a hotel could locate in East Harlem without a special permit. Really, it's just along 125th Street, right around East River Plaza, a couple of sites on Park Avenue. That's it. They're just not allowed otherwise. This text amendment would make locating a hotel on these few places much more difficult than it is today. It theoretically allows the City Planning Commission to control the design of hotels and manage conflicts with neighbors, but the findings that the City Planning Commission must make, they're very, very weak in the text. It says, you know, essentially, the hotel will not impair the future use or development of the surrounding area. And the commission may prescribe additional conditions and safeguards to minimize adverse effects on the character of the surrounding area. So normally these findings are much more detailed, and they're very, very basic here. That's it. That's all I have for you on hotels. I'd be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, George. We also have Anne here if there are any questions that we have for DCP. So please be mindful of that. And if there's anything you'd like to add, Annie, we'd be willing to hear out. Are you good?
No, thank you for summarizing.
Yeah, we love you. Any questions? I know what you said. Yes, sir.
Sure, this is a general question. I think it applies to all of the presentations that you're going to give, but New York City kind of has one tool to control things, and that's zoning. So zoning text amendments we're seeing here tonight as being that tool to further control things. As a blanket application across New York City, how effective is it as a tool to help manage development?
Generally zoning text amendments? Oh, they're very effective.
Right, but as our only tool.
Oh, well, when you make these changes citywide, it's kind of a blunt tool. Because essentially what you're saying is that the same rules that would apply in East Harlem, that apply in Queens, that apply in Brooklyn, right? But that's also kind of the nature of zoning. We have districts. They work pretty much the same way everywhere. With some exceptions, you could always write exceptions in the zoning, right? If and believe me, there are hundreds of exceptions in zonings already written. But, you know, it's still a blunt tool. And in this case, you would have a special permit required in East Harlem and in Eastern Queens, right? And also, you know, in Midtown. So it's a fair observation.
I won't ask the question again 2 more times in our next presentations, but thank you.
Okay.
Yes,
From your standpoint, what is the kind of underlying motivation behind the zoning text amendment? Like why?
So this one will require new hotels to go through ULURP. And that means that it involves city council, it involves the city planning commission. You can make the hotels better from design standpoint. And personally speaking, I think that there's a lot of benefits for a little bit more discretionary review and design. But typically, that's not how we do things in New York. We have an as-of-right development, as you know. And so this would allow for more design, but it also allows for the city council member to come in and get involved in the process and get things that they might want for their community out of the special permit, as they normally do during the ULURP process, right? There is a process and if to get their vote, there may be things that are required from the developer.
So it doesn't Is that to say that the status quo of hotels are designed poorly or without regard for local?
Well, I think there are good designs for hotels and there are bad designs for hotels. I think DCP, when they came in, they threw out some really nice examples of bad designs for hotels. Now, however, you could have put another development in there, an office building or retail or some other mixed use, and it could have still been a bad design, right? It's bad design or poor design are not unique to hotels, right? It could have been any other use, and no one's talking about a special permit on those, which seems a little odd to me. But you know, they've expressed their reasons for it. Is that they get complaints about hotels, and that this gives them another tool.
Yeah, the picture that I saw on the presentation were really poor.
Yeah. I mean, these are two of them that I took, right? These are
Right.
in C43 districts, if I remember right. And, you know, parking in the front, big blank wall at the street line, you know, that's not good. You could handle that in other ways, but they're deciding to do that, or they're wanting to do it with a special permit.
Any other questions for George or Aaron? Yes.
So, the relationship to the M class of zoning, it has much more effect in industrial neighborhoods to potentially change the shape of the developing neighborhood, where there have been our little slice of M,
It's tiny.
very small.
Yeah.
Is that fair to say?
It's very small, yeah.
Okay, yeah, just want to know kind of, with the blunt instrument, kind of what the effect, is here relative to the intention of the, increased control that is the goal.
Right. I mean, there's no doubt that this impacts other community districts more. Just because you already have the special district requirement in the East Harlem Corridor Special District, and there's a very limited amount of other sites where this is going to take effect. But, it does along 125th Street and 126th Street, the C63 district there on 2nd Avenue. So, I mean, there are some.
Okay. All right, we are up for a vote on this. If there are no further questions or comments or any recommendations on the motion? Don't do this to me, Ola.
Are we saying motion to adopt the text amendment or motion to support the text amendment? Okay. I motion to support the hotel's text amendment.
Second?
Second.
Jessica Morris,
Yes.
Jason Villanueva,
Yes.
Ivy Field,
Yes.
LC Encarnacion,
Yes.
motion passes.
All right, guys, next is first two, yes?
Yes, Fresh 2. Okay. So, briefly, the Fresh program provides zoning incentives to developments that include a grocery store. Essentially, the bonus is for buildings, developments with grocery stores to be taller, 15 feet, and larger, 20,000 square feet. Than their neighbors, right? So you have one zoning district, the one with the grocery store can be bigger, but not enormously so, right? It's about one story. And so you're effectively using zoning to subsidize a particular use, which is a grocery store. So the proposed, that exists now, right? That's what we have now. And the proposed changes expand the area covered by Fresh. This is all outside of Manhattan. It makes modifications to the program, relatively minor, I think. And it institutes a prohibition against clustering to prevent many Fresh stores from locating near each other. So East Harlem, we already covered by Fresh. There is no change in coverage except for there is a change to the 125th Street Special District to explicitly allow the Fresh program to go there. That special district was written before Fresh, and it didn't explicitly say that. And there have been two There have been 2 developments that have used the Fresh program since it was adopted in 2009. 3rd Avenue and 121st Street and Park Avenue and 111th Street. And so this is a map that shows all the grocery stores. The little black dots are the grocery stores in Manhattan, or in the Community District 11, as of 2018. And the 2 that use the Fresh program are in red. Okay, so there was a question from the last meeting, which I'll try to answer, is how does the prohibition against clustering work? Does it prevent the clustering of just Fresh stores or Fresh and other grocery stores? And really it focuses on the Fresh. It prevents the whole bunch of developments near each other from using the Fresh program. So you could theoretically, I think this is where it was coming from, is you could have grocery stores that are getting essentially Fresh subsidies, zoning subsidies, I guess there are tax subsidies as well, that are competing against grocery stores that are not, that are nearby. And I think that's where that question came from. And so that is a possibility with this program. And that's all I have on it. The changes, the modifications are really relatively minor. They decrease the amount of space required for food, for fresh food. But you still have to have a majority of your space with fresh food. It allows a little bit more flexibility, a little changings to the glazings. I think the program's been in existence for 12 years and they tweaked it.
Yeah, agreed. I know that one of the things that we spoke about was, while it kind of is to sell more fresh produce, it doesn't necessarily, and the idea is if you have more of these supermarkets, then you have them competing and then prices will eventually kind of get lower because of that. But there is no guarantee that.
There's no guarantee of that at all, right?
This is a part of this.
This is just zoning, right?
This is just zoning, so there is no real land use measure that can assure pricing. But I know that that's kind of what it totes, which is the more we bring in, the more flexibility we have on pricing. It really hasn't.
It's supply side, if you will, right? You give incentives to put grocery stores in, and then there are more grocery stores, and hopefully good things happen.
Correct. But hopefully.
Yeah, hopefully.
I do agree in the fact that we are preventing saturation. I know that was happening in Brooklyn. I
Yes,
believe.
right.
And it was really about the square footage. They were kind of seeing it as all right, I told you I speak with my hands, so this is why it was no good to have this in my hand. And I know that's so I'm glad that they are addressing that. I did not know about the special district. I don't know if I just missed that.
Yeah, it's something that really wasn't focused on. It was only when I was reviewing the zoning
Right.
text did I see that, is that there are changes to allow it on the 125th Street, to allow it in the special district.
Do we know, so East Harlem has been, and maybe this is a question I don't know, have we been a part of it for the whole 12 years that the program has been in existence?
Yes.
Yes.
Those two that are there. So is there a reason why there's not more? Do you know if it's hard to become a fresh food supermarket, or is it difficult?
You mean why there's only been 2 applications so far? I think it's just the timeline of how applications are coming in. It's actually not too, in other areas in Upper Manhattan, we've seen less, and we're getting more in now just through the kind of natural timeline of things. So I think that potentially people were looking at where there was already such a dearth of grocery stores, and maybe they determined that there wasn't as much of a demand for the developers there to build a grocery store. But when we think about where we can start to see clustering, Central Harlem and East Harlem were neighborhoods that we could imagine that we could start to see situations that we're seeing, like Crown Heights and Bed-Stuy.
And to answer your question about when those happened, I reviewed both of them for the community board. One was in 2016 and the other was in 2018, I believe. The 2 that went into effect. So they're new.
Yeah.
But there is no grocery store at 111th and Park. Is that forthcoming with that new development?
Well, it's I don't know where it is in the process, but it got approved. It may not even be built yet. I know the 3rd Avenue one is built.
how effective has the program been? What is the kind of the sort of timeline to impact relative to where the need actually is? Are there better ways to, you know, deliver this type of service provision or point of access than a citywide zone text?
So in 2009, there was a lot of discussion about what you just said. You know, why are we picking out, why are we focusing on this single use? There are other important uses too, that could use zoning incentives, tax incentives, other incentives, right? I mean, you know, so in 2009, there was enormous discussion about the appropriateness of this. However, that's, you know, now it's about amending the existing program. And you know, there's been less discussion because it's in place. And I think there are 28, it's been used 28 times, something like, and so it's been used, it hasn't been used wildly. So that's averaging a couple a year, a little bit more than 2 a year since it's been put into effect citywide. And so, you know, it hasn't been a program that has had major impact, but you know, however, if you live near one, you might say, yeah, it had a major impact to me, right? And so, you know, and that's really, you know, we live in relatively small areas, right? And so it could impact, it could have really impacted some people. So, you know, I think your question is absolutely still appropriate. Is this the right use of the zoning resolution? Is it appropriate to give bonuses to particular uses like this? And should we be doing this at all?
It's also a question of sort of use of resources to do this, to bring this to us and make these small amendments to something that was questionable to begin with. And I think I return to your description, George, of the churn of affordable housing. And I think of the supermarkets that are underbuilt everywhere in places. And so if you're providing zoning incentives for markets to go up, then eventually the markets that are there now are going to be old and grubby and not the best place to shop for your food. So
what happens to them?
There, then, you know, so there's a 15, 20-year kind of impact here that I don't know has necessarily been well understood or kind of speculated on.
I don't know that anybody's really looked at that. I mean, that's I think a fair concern.
East Harlem specifically, having just, you know, been around the block a couple times on the way here and, you know, understand how things change over the course of a decade, even when we're waiting for fresh markets to appear. That means that, you know, there are other places that are deteriorating that are significantly underbuilt, that have been rezoned, that will go away. And so I wonder about those effects that are not necessarily calculated.
I think it's fair. That's a very fair observation.
And just to clarify, the incentive is relational to what they actually use, right? So it's not like they just get 20 square feet.
Oh yeah, right. It's
relational.
Yep. That's right. That's right. But there are also minimum sizes. You can't use, you can't do like a little pocket store, right, and get a bonus, right? So they want an actual grocery store.
With that, on the text amendment for Fresh 2, do we have any further questions or motion?
I guess I just have one question. The operators of the grocery stores, I mean, how are they selected? Is there like some kind of an RFP? Like
No.
who?
So there's a developer, they come in and they get an operator, right? And they get an agreement with the operator to operate the grocery store. It's like a contract. And there's not I mean, the developer may do an RFP, but it's essentially a private arrangement.
Sure, but so it could be, I mean, it could be a Whole Foods or it could be a Key Food or a C-Count. It could literally be anything.
It just needs to have a certain percentage of fresh food and then other goods as well. Yeah, so there's nothing like, about whole food or key food or
Well, that's
whatever.
why we were talking about affordability, because those are
Yeah.
more likely to take.
Yeah, I mean, listen, the way these boundaries are drawn, I mean, do we really need the fresh program at 97th Street in Madison? Right? I mean, but we have it. It applies there. I think if you were to like really dig into it a little bit, it's just like
Well, the thing is that we have it. We're just amending the program.
Yes, exactly.
So we have it.
It's
whether
there.
we agree with it or fresh it or not, we have it.
That is exactly right.
We just, okay. I did see a question from the. Oh, I'm sorry, I can't see.
I was trying to whisper your name to her.
My question is, once these stores are open, if there's any issue where they close down,
What happens?
for financial reasons and whatever, what happens to that space and that's there?
Right.
And what happens to the extra forest that they got to
Right.
build for them?
So, okay, this has been a big concern about the program in 2009. Was that what happens when you build the building and then it closes down? Now, from what I understand, or from what city planning has told me, is that virtually no stores have done that up to now. But there is a process in place that if you can't find somebody, you can get the restrictive declaration removed from it, but there's a process involved in that. And so it would stay there. The extra floor area would stay there. The building would stay there. If you really can't find a tenant, there is a process to lift the restriction, but it's not a trivial process. And again, according to DCP, if I remember right, there like virtually none or one or none, something like that, have gone through that process.
And that process really was intended for when things happen between getting the fresh certification and constructing the floor area. I have in my notes because I wanted to double check if they have been built with if the buildings are built larger than permitted, they are still required to maintain that grocery store in perpetuity. So my understanding was that process was for when that residential or whatever floor area was not constructed and occupied. So
Oh, interesting. So you're saying there is no out if once it's been occupied, once there's been a C of O.
that's how the notes are phrased, and I can follow up with that clarification.
Well, okay. So there may be. Certainly, it's not going to get demolished. Let's put it that way. There are lots of incentives to keep the grocery store in there. I think there may be a way out of it, but it would be a very difficult process to get that lifted.
But just because it hasn't happened yet, or maybe one has happened, there's really nothing to stop it from happening,
Well, you know what I'll do is.
Spaces, used for something else, other than fresh food.
Well, the DCP is saying that actually that the process is not something that can be lifted. I thought it could be lifted with a. Anyways, it's something that we could look up and figure out if it's important to the board before your vote. Today. I mean, meaning like it's in my computer. I'd have to go to my computer and look it up.
I mean, we gotta vote today.
Yeah, no, I mean, I would go over there and look it up.
I mean, it's a clarification. The reality is, as a builder, a contractor, and those that know development, it is a lot more challenging for them to try to extend the process and to keep moving forward. It's a cost that's going to be involved. So,
Absolutely.
I read the text. I was satisfied. There are concerns that are evident from 2001 that should be addressed, but I don't think that's something necessarily.
And they're not really changing it in this, so
Yeah.
it's an existing program right now.
It's successful. I've grown up in New York, lived in very dilapidated neighborhoods, and I've never seen a fresh food store. So to see these stores going in some of the challenging areas in our district as well as outside of the boroughs, within the boroughs, outside of our district, it's a negative.
That's a motion.
There was, I think transparency requirements are a part of this, or
They are part of the current program. There are minor modifications, I think, to existing buildings that adopt the Fresh program, where adding transparency would be difficult. And it's, again, one of these like little tweaks that they make to the program because it's been in place for 12 years and they figured out what's worked and what hasn't worked.
you know, transparency is one thing, but transparency kind of, it's sort of papered over insides is another thing. I think I'm sorry, your name? Beverly. What Beverly, I think was what I extracted from your comment was if we have to have a grocery store and there is not a grocery store, do we just have vacancy then for an extended period of time in the event that tenant for this purpose is not found and cannot, do away with the
Right.
covenant or whatever. So is it just the answer is it stays vacant until there is a grocer? If floor area cannot be subtracted, and I mean, I think it's a question of unknowns that we as a community would experience very freely that are not necessarily well understood by the rules that would regulate it.
Seems like there needs to be an enforcement mechanism whereby the developers find a lot of money if there's no one selling fresh food in their space.
Oh, there is an enforcement mechanism, right? I mean, that currently exists, right? And they can't. I mean, it's like any of these zoning bonus programs, like the residential plazas, others. You know, there are flaws because private actors do what they're going to do, right? But the enforcement is there, and the fines when they happen are steep. And it's part of it though is getting people in the community to make complaints, right? Because if people don't complain, no one looks. And the squeaky wheel gets the grease, if you will, in New York City. It's just the way it works.
And there's no direct line for those sort of program-based fines back to the community benefits or direct improvements. When there are things going wrong and someone's paying into something because of it, all shakes out in the wash, we assume.
Yeah, it goes to the city. It doesn't come back to the community. The fines, you mean? Yeah. It's a good idea, though, right? I love it.
Piggy bank.
Nickel for every 311 call we make.
Yeah.
Question consent, right, on the violations.
Any further questions? Going on to the motion, hopefully. Okay, I'm asking for a motion on the Fresh 2 text amendment. For support.
Motion to support, Jason.
Second.
I'll second the motion.
Jessica Morris,
No.
Jason Piñera,
Yes.
Heidi Hill,
Yes.
Elsie Encarnacion,
Yes.
motion passes.
Okay, now health and fitness.
Health and fitness. Okay. Removal of the special permit for health and fitness establishments. So, unlike almost every other use in New York City, gyms, dance studios, yoga studios, massage therapists, similar uses, they need to get a BSA special permit to locate their establishment. And when people hear that, they usually say, what? Why? Right? And there's a whole history which you heard about that has to do with illegal activities in the 1970s. But ultimately this makes the location of these establishments much more difficult and expensive when you compare this to other commercial uses. This change will make locating them comparable to other commercial uses, like gyms, right? So instead of having to go through a $50,000 process to get a special permit, they could locate as of right. And also in East Harlem, The East Harlem Corridor Special District that went into effect in 2017 already removed this constraint. So this was something that's been in the works for a while. Okay, so the change will allow commercial gyms and studios to locate as of right in most commercial and manufacturing districts. So like the red and purple areas that you see here on this map, they could locate here, but not the gray areas. The gray areas, you could have licensed massage therapists locate there as you would a doctor's office as a community facility. But commercial gyms would be limited to C and M zones. Okay, so there was a question from the last meeting. Why just the red and purple areas, right? That was a question that came up. Why not elsewhere as well? And you know, this is a fundamental question about zoning. What is zoning about? In zoning, we generally segregate the commercial uses from the residential uses, and gyms are commercial uses. And so what we're doing is we're essentially making gyms into a regular commercial use, and so then it follows the regular commercial segregation, if you will. You know, really the question is, I think if there's a problem with where they can go on this map, is something, you know, for the board to consider at a later time is the idea of proposing and asking for a rezoning. This is something that this board has a history of doing. In 2013, there was the recommendations for Park Avenue, which eventually morphed into the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, where there was rezoning recommendations in those plans that were community-driven, community developed and community-driven, and ultimately eventually implemented. And really that's the question. If you want like more commercial uses in your district, well, you need a rezoning. And if you want to get a rezoning, it's better for you to develop those ideas yourself as opposed to asking DCP to come in with their ideas on a rezoning. I always encourage community boards to think about the future of their communities, of what you want to see, and develop your own plans and ideas, and then take those to DCP as opposed to the other way around. So if you want more gyms and on like First Avenue and Second Avenue where there are no commercial districts, well, maybe there's a rezoning that's needed there. That's all I got.
All right, any questions from the comments? This is great, this really,
Wait, sorry, I just have one clarification on the last thing you said. You said on First and Second Avenue there are no commercial districts?
Well, now, the lower part of Second Avenue, the lower part of First Avenue, Park Avenue as well on this map, you can see that there are big gaps.
Right.
And it's not everywhere on First and Second Avenue. It's the lower parts that essentially either the portion that abuts the rail trestle on Park Avenue, south of, 112th Street, and then essentially the stretches that abut the big housing developments, right? Washington houses, East River houses, they don't have commercial overlays. They don't have commercial districts on campus.
But on certain, like I'm thinking about, was it First Avenue? Yeah, no. I'm thinking about Third Avenue actually. But there, I mean, you have you have shops along those corridors, so are they in mixed use?
Well, no. So Third Avenue is commercial all the way up, right, from the bottom to the top. All right. I was thinking more along the lines of this, you know, like these sections of Second Avenue and First Avenue,
the Metropolitan Hospital, and it's just
I mean, where you essentially you have big stretches of R72 zoning, which is for Tower in the Park, right, where they came in, demolished everything, and put up the towers in the park, and back then they really wanted to segregate uses, and they didn't put commercial overlays on these things, so people had to walk out of their homes or drive out of their homes to go shopping, you know, to another part of town, and that was the vision of the time. And so we live in that legacy, and that's the one thing that rezonings can do. And in 2017, the housing estates between 112 and 116, they got commercial overlays added to them. That was part of it. Nobody's built any commercial there, but the idea was to be able to allow it, right? You know, so you could actually put a store on a NYCHA campus, which is, I think, for many people would think is a good thing. I know some residents didn't like that idea at the time, but you know, we have commercial on wide streets, and so why stop it on the NYCHA campuses? And that's what the rezoning, at least in that area, called for.
I had a question. So I know in the beginning of the presentation you said it would make it more difficult, but it would allow it in more spaces. Is that what?
No, no.
Location? Much more difficult.
So the difficult is for hotels, right? The special permit for hotels is going to make hotels more difficult. This is going to make it much more easy.
Yeah, that's what I was hoping.
Much easier. This is like, and it's like all the paperwork, all the effort that goes into this right now. You know, it's just, it keeps the BSA busy. You know, there's always these applications coming in. It's, you know, personally, I'm going to say, I keep my personal opinions out of this. This has like been a long time coming.
Well, I mean, you have, you know, the one, them that I have to walk to us.
And you know, the thing is that they, if I may also, they did it well, because like in the East Harlem corridors, it's just like remove the special permit, let it be. And now what they say is they remove the special permit, but you know, if you have these high impact uses that have vibrations or sounds, well, you got to go through this special process to mitigate that. You know, they didn't have that in East Harlem corridors, but now you'll have it, right? So there will be some negative effects, but it's designed to mitigate those negative effects to the surrounding neighbors. It's actually well designed and well thought out, I think. I think they did a really nice job with this one. If I may, like just editorialize for a moment. Compared to some of the others, I think that this one's really nice.
Yes.
Somebody has to offer a way forward.
Yes.
You ready for it?
Uh-huh.
I don't know, I'm supposed to think about a rezoning, so I think we better. I'm done with what we're here for tonight before.
Right, before we get to rezoning East Harlem right now tonight, there are no further questions.
I have a question. Marcia.
Yes,
And it's probably, it bothers me more personally than the tax professional. With the EM is the concept of the mixing the gyms with the bars. I mean, there's, you know, we can't negate the concern that's there. And I know DCP is claiming that people are going to police it and authorize it, but my perspective of removing standards and like if this was the gym, I think that I've shared this with a fellow board member, when they started speaking about their challenges of going to the gym,
Yeah.
that started swinging. But when I'm hearing that you're gonna allow these parlors or these massage therapy places to operate without, you know, without the same regulation, why wouldn't there be a concern of that black market being violated? And in particular, for our district, where, you know, I mean, oppression exists as much as it can in such a community like El Barrio.
Yeah.
Why would I just openly, and I get what they did in zoning and texting because they were trying to push commercials to come in here. I get the politics. But why would I just sit there and say, hey, just, you know, deregulate that, and again, this isn't to the gyms. I understand they have a regulation, but this is more for me for the thought processes of, and then this is, you know.
So can I comment on that? Because there's a detail that I thought was really nice, because they added a defined term in zoning. I forget exactly what it was. It's essentially unlicensed massage therapist or unlicensed physical establishment. And it says explicitly, I mean, so if you're a massage therapist, you have to have a license from the state. And it says if you operate an unlicensed facility, you can't do it, right? So there's a prohibition against that unlicensed use. The thing that you're worried about is actually written into the zoning. So what that means is that, you know, let's say bad things happen and you have an establishment like this open up, all right? So the city can come in and shut them down on a zoning violation, and the people that work there get sent home instead of sent to prison. All right, And I think that's actually pretty cool.
Mhm.
You shut down the establishment, the owners of this place, whereas the people that are working there, they get to go home.
With that, can I make a motion? I'd like to motion to support citywide health and fitness tax amendment.
Any second?
I'll second the motion to support.
Jessica Morris,
Yes.
Jason CB11M,
No.
Ivy Hume,
Yes.
Elsie Encarnacion,
Yes.
motion passes.
Did we just finish that? Good. Thank you so much, Shore.
Oh,
Thank
it's my pleasure.
For us every single day. I think you can remember. Right, with that, we'll move on. Any old business? Oh, Angel has. Yes.
About business, when you're done. About business?
Yes. New business is rezoning that will, that I will take on as an individual.
Have mercy.
Yes. Angel?
So we did receive a copy of a submitted application to DCP for a proposed development at 56-62 East 125th Street. That's essentially next to the Durst property on the west side of 125th Street Park. And it is currently proposed as a new 25-story subcellar and cellar building, mixed-use retail and hotel. And they're applying for the visual and performing arts bonus. It's still not a certified application, they just submitted it, but we can get a copy of that. And I wanted to share that with you all as people tell that George referenced earlier. We also know that at 126th and 3rd Avenue, there is it's an EDC control site that they're planning to develop a boutique hotel on, but it's kind of hit a snag with the whole COVID bit, so it's kind of gone up. We also see that they're preparing for the demolition of the National Light Theater on 5th Avenue. That's a project that came through the board in 2017, and they've come to the land use committee a couple times to provide some brief updates on that project. Sorry? Yeah. And what was the other one I wanted to show you guys? Oh, yes. And the former Pathmark site, which is subject to a transit easement, the developer at sub-development and the MTA have agreed on the volume for the transit easement. So essentially it'll be at the corner of 125 and Lexington, like where the station is now. So the station entrance is now. Most of the volume is underground. So that project is moving forward in terms of plans. The latest iteration of that project, which had most recently been intended to go up as a fully commercial 14-story office building, is now they have a couple of other options that they're weighing. They're considering a mixed use with residential. They're considering the voluntary inclusionary housing program and the fresh program. But I think at this point they're at the sketch stage. One interesting thing about that is that, for those that are thinking about, it being the former Pathmark site and the supermarket being lost there, across the street, there's a new supermarket going into the building at 125 in Lexington, which is currently wrapping up construction. So there'll be a food bazaar there, and if the former Pathmark site is developed, including a supermarket, there'll be a supermarket diagonally across the street. That's all. I meant to share that earlier.
That's a lot. Thank you, Angel.
Sure.
So for the last Raisas and the 3 citywide tax amendments, we will be voting at our full board in July 20.
Oh, this Tuesday, July 13th,
July 13th,
at the Dream Charter School on 104th Street, 2nd Avenue.
at the Dream Charter School at 104th Street, 2nd Avenue. We will be voting as a full board on these amendments, and then in September, we will be voting on open restaurants, correct?
Yes.
Okay, at our land use meeting and then at the full board meeting in September. So we still have some time to, think about that. We will be meeting again in August, I hope, and I want to promise that, but, no? No, I said we're not meeting.
Oh, no.
No, that's what I'm saying. I want to promise that we will not have to meet this open for anything. We're not supposed to.
Can I ask a point of clarification?
Sure.
I don't ever know if that's actually in order when I do that, but, now that it's good.
Everything's great.
All of these points of support, are they opportunities for meaningfully voicing any concerns? I know that needs more work, but the position of the board as it represents this community has always been incredibly strong in its holding to long-standing positions at every point. So I guess I'm asking, are we missing opportunities as a point of process, or as leadership of this committee, is your intention to focus where it matters and let things that don't necessarily matter so much?
You mean as a support for like the tax amendment?
Yeah, I mean, sometimes
No.
there's, support and approval or different conditions happen,
Yeah, depending on.
So I guess I'm just asking, where are the opportunities for the community's voice to be heard if we don't necessarily all unanimously agree, but we do agree on some of the, some of the principles, right?
Yeah, I think in the first couple of rounds of the presentation, bringing those points up, and then if we do have a motion, we should always add comments, especially if they are things that we want to see that are not in the text, to those motions or resolutions or to whatever we come out of committee. That should always be there if it comes up. Like if you have, you can always say, okay, I want to add this to the amendment, I want to support with these conditions, and then we would all vote on it as if we did a motion.
In theory, we would come with our kind of clear conditions
Right.
to say tonight's session. Because I know, at the very least, the borough president's office reads what we put forward and takes it to heart. And I think often that's the opportunity to make a point that then gets sort of further action taken. And if we're not necessarily kind of aware of the process well enough or organized well enough to make those points when we have the opportunity, sometimes we get lost on. So I guess
Yeah, for sure. And that's why it's important to read all of these before a meeting, before we walk in, to kind of have that background knowledge prior to that. And then anything that we get after meetings, we can put out and discuss it. That might come from a community member. It might not even be a committee member or a community board member. It could be some community-based organization gathering people together and saying, hey, these are the things that we can adapt those things into what we all want to put out there. But it's ultimately up to us to put that into our vote. And so we have to be very clear prior to going to full board or, that's what we want so that when we present it to full board, they're understanding because that's what they'll be voting on ultimately. So we have to kind of come prepared.
So just in process, last time we met in June, we had the presentations and there was a lot of feedback. This is the first time we sort of saw some of the things that came to the committee. That is distilling takeaways at that point would set us up to then kind of have potential points of condition.
Right, and we can share that.
Sure, you're hyper-technical. Some things are kind of concerns or less, technical, and I think that voice is still really important to put forward, even though maybe it's not quite so dialed in, it's still heard in the process and can trigger things.
Yeah, and that work is going to be done outside of the meeting, right? It could be send an email or we can write it out and send it to George and say, hey, George, can you make it super technical? But this is just kind of what we think. But then when we sit at the meeting where we're about to take the vote and present that should be fleshed out. And presented for the vote by the committee. But this way we all know and go in front of the full board and have that set. But that can be done, from the moment we know that the presentation is happening, reading that text, speaking to each other, be offline. But eventually we have to come to the table with those ideas.
I guess I just have one sort of thought on that. Like, there was a meeting a few months ago where we wanted to support something with conditions, and I think then there ended up being a motion made on the thing before we had had a chance to really formulate the conditions, which I was personally very disappointed about. In any case, it went forward, but it seems that in order for us to be effective or efficient time-wise, that a draft of conditions, we want to support, the citywide hotels text amendment with the following conditions, then if you're the person that has these conditions in mind, you kind of need to have them written out beforehand and circulate them to all of us.
I mean, I could jump in. I think, in my opinion, it should be mandatory.
Yeah.
It is so inefficient and unfair to members that have done the research, who are doing the work, to then sit there when it's time to take a position and start concerning ourselves with, theoretical conceptions. There's a lot of challenges that have to be dealt with. And I do think, I can't speak for the chair, but I know in other committees, the resolution process, you're not doing it today.
No.
And we're taking a stance. None of this stuff that I got to give our district manager and chair a lot of credit. A lot of this information they get dropped on them today, and it's coming to us at the same time that it gets to them. It's just, it's government, right? There's some diplomacy there, but the reality is the democratic process allows you to opine. And if we approve without recommendation, whose fault is that? Right? If we then approve, we then give the recommendation, that we're advocacy, we provide advice. That's our role, right? The follow-up is the activism. I don't know what the other board members do here, but as an activist, it don't stop right here.
Right.
Unfortunately.
I guess the challenge, Elsie, and I don't know how to do this effectively, because maybe we don't always agree whether to support or not support, or approve or disapprove, but conditions should be things that we do all agree on one way or another. So putting forward a set of conditions without putting forward a position is sometimes the difficult homework to come to the table with. Just because a set of conditions go forward doesn't mean it is or one or the other thing. They're almost separate from.
Right, it's regardless of what
Unless they're written
happens, we think X, Y, Z. But I guess if those things are to be agreed upon, they should be written down, right? If the four of us are going to agree on something, they need to be in writing, and
Prior to.
it has to happen prior to, only because I could imagine sitting here and trying to write a sentence. I mean, I don't know. I'm not.
Well, it's been attempted. It's happened. We've been in the community board for some time now. We've seen that take place either at full board or at other committees, and it's always a mess. People will then abstain or not vote or vote in contrary to something that they actually are in support of, but they're not in support of positions, and because it's happening on the fly and you're taking in that information, so that should not happen. That's messy. And we do have timelines. With ULERP, unfortunately, things move at a certain pace, so we do have a limited time to make a suggestion, but we do have that time, so there might be a way for Angel and I to work together and create kind of a document where we just kind of, I think we do have, we all have access to the drive and the spreadsheets and, communication with each other, so there is definitely, and I think we have to do that more. Yes.
So yes to all that, and this is music to me. I like all this kind of talk. And it's just a matter of you all figuring out how you want to work together to do that, right? So the only thing that I would add is given the period that you have, so typically on the land use, you have 60 days, right? And, it could be even better about bringing in their, developers 30 days in advance at least, if not more. So I might, like, a suggestion could be right from that point, start taking notes, right? And start like, like assembling your list of, potential conditions or issues to discuss. And when you have, and this is where it's tricky, let's say we have a presentation this evening for the first time, right? You start, after they have the presentation, you have your questions. You can have a quick chat amongst yourselves. Like, are we agreed on 1, 2, 3? Or, should we follow up on 1, 2, and 3? Jot those down, put them on a shared document. And then you start fleshing out, like, that can turn into a condition or that can turn into a point of information in your whereases. And then you kind of work on that together in preparation for when you're actually taking action. Like, you can't take action offline, obviously.
Right.
But you can start crafting something, offline amongst yourself. You have the 60 days, right? So maybe, in some cases it's unfair because you have 5 land use applications, right? So then maybe you split them up. So like you say, Joe and Jill, like this month, you guys are the drafters of position 1, and Billy and Bobby, you're the drafters of position 2, and like they're the ones that coordinate like the input, and then you have a shared document, you start filling it in, and then you have something to work from for like, when you're at the 30-day mark, maybe you can clean it up, tighten it up, and then at the 60-day mark, it should be clean, right? So dotting some I's, maybe some grammar, so that at that, that last meeting like tonight, you're just pretty much up and down and just fine tuning as opposed to like, populating the document.
And most importantly, that we're all on the same accord with the
Yeah.
board, because that's essentially like our committee bringing forth our work and getting a whole body that really may not have heard the presentation before, who may not have all of the information, they'll be getting it at that time from us and from our recommendations. So we want to make sure we get those things approved, if that's what we, either, whatever we decide the committee should be approved by the full board, but it has to make sense. Because if not, then it gets into the whole mess that we've seen in the past, which actually hasn't happened too much to it.
If I may, I'll say that I think this is great. I say everything that Angel says, but I can also help. It's one of the things I do for other boards is I help them with their preliminary, like just editing. I mean, I think it's always got to come from the board members first. But issues of fact or technical things that can get woven in, I can do that. But you're right, technical is only really a small part of what people are expecting from community boards.
It's so important to sort of infuse those technicalities, which are essentially what land use is all about, with the kind of the human aspect of it that I think we represent in some ways for.
And the why, right? Like, why are we thinking this is a good idea? And one of the reasons why George says that we should be thinking about the bigger picture of the zoning. The East Harbor plan gives me nightmares when I see the picture up there. It was a lot of work and it was a long time. Every time I see the front of the East Harbor plan, it like brings me back. It was a lot of work. But I think it resulted in exactly what the community wanted to see. Of course, there were some things that we couldn't get or that we had to negotiate on, but for the most part, it was really community led. We can do something like that for other things and not just huge, rezoning. So, I think it's good work, and I think that's a great way to end off the year and our last meeting of the year. And hopefully next year, we'll be having some hopefully new members join our committee. I see some new members here, so I'm just going to say that out loud. But yeah, next year, we'll have taking another stab at refining the process and hopefully coming up with a better way of doing it and better way of informing each other and the rest of the community. And we still have to figure out a way to fill the room, right? Now that we have space to it, we got to make sure the community sees it. And get rid of it. So, goals, right? We do have to work on those goals too, right? Every year, we have to work on goals too every year, right? There you go. So we've already started. I think that's it. You guys can call the meeting to an end.